Hello. Welcome to Victory Fashion, a talk on what people wore at the end of the war to commemorate the 75th anniversary of victory in Europe. My name's Lucy Adlington, I'm a costume historian and I usually work with History Wardrobe. I'm on tour live in the UK, usually on stage with a fantastic array of original clothes and accessories from whichever era we're talking about. But today I'm speaking to you from lockdown. I'm on a farm in Yorkshire and hoping that no animals wander in, or farmers for that matter. So what would you be wearing to celebrate VE Day in 1945? Well, the chances are you'd be in uniform. Hundreds of thousands of service personnel worldwide would be issued with their kit. It would denote which service they belonged to. It would give a sense of pride. It would show rank and function. And it would also give that sense of belonging. You weren't supposed to be individual in your uniform. It wasn't supposed to be fashionable or to have flair, be on trend. You were designed to be practical and to fit in. So the first bit of uniform I'm going to show you is very fitting since I'm on a farm. It's from the Land Army. Now I do have corded breeches and I've got dungarees, but this is actually one of my favourite pieces of kit. It's an original Land Army jumper. It belonged to a Wiltshire girl called Mary. She loved her time in the Land Army. And you can see here the brassard shows a triangle for each month of service. Now, they did see a lot of wear and tear uniforms, and Mary couldn't get hold of the proper shade of green to repair the holes in her jumper. So you can see that they've been darned with a lighter shade. Well, there was a war on. And if you find that you've got holes in your stockings, by the way, or your woolens, one of these will come in handy, a darning mushroom. Because of course the idea is to make your clothes last as long as possible. You can't just bob out and get a new jumper. You certainly won't be issued with one unless you can absolutely prove that it's completely unwearable. And during the war, lots of woolly clothes, once they'd got too tatty to wear, the wool would be unravelled, washed and knitted up again into something else. Now, May 1945 for Mary, the Land Army girl, it actually meant demobilisation from a job that she loved. And so it's with some sadness that she set aside her uniform. If we move on to the Army, the ATS, I've got here a rather splendid uniform, the jacket and skirt, there's the belt, and this belonged to a Yorkshire woman called Wyneth. She was secretly very proud of her stripes. Now in May 1945, Wyneth was on service with General Montgomery's GCHQ and she was in Belgium. Belgium had suffered under Nazi occupation and it had been heavily looted, like so much of Europe. However, and Wyneth never actually explained how she managed this, she got her hands on a length of wine red velvet, and this was made into a beautiful ball gown. Perfect if you're going to a victory ball. Once the ball gown was out of fashion, she had it converted into this. A beautiful evening cape. So there we are, lovely luxury of wine red velvet. And it just goes to show that even a simple garment like this has a story to tell, from Belgium to Yorkshire. Now the army isn't all about parties, of course, and it's not all about smart uniforms with your lanyards and your brass buttons polished. You need to put graft in, and that means getting dirty. So I'll show you now a lovely set of ATS overalls. They belonged to a lady called Jean, and when she was demobilised after 1945, she carried on wearing these. In fact, she wore them out a bit, had to mend them. And if you look closely on the bottom, you'll see she wore them as painting overalls. And the lady who donated these, her daughter, she said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. They've been used for painting." I said, "No, that's brilliant. Clothes have stories." And certainly, even in 1945, at the end of war, we can't afford to be throwing things away. They're in very short supply. I'm sure you'll have heard of the British initiative, Make, Do and Mend. There's nothing new to this. For anyone who's been on a budget, you have to be thrifty with clothes. And so darning, upcycling, recycling, turning two garments into one, they are all crucial. And chaps, if you have gone out to work and you've left your golfing kit in the wardrobe, it's not going to be there when you come home. Those +4s can be made into a lovely tweed skirt. And your shirts, well, they'll probably end up being made into kids' clothes. The British government issued lots of booklets. Here's one, Make, Do, Amend. But it's the same across Europe. Every country had to make do with very limited resources. And so I've got brochures from Germany, from Czechoslovakia, from Japan. Make your clothes last longer. It's perhaps something that resonates with us nowadays, isn't it? So the idea of uniforms having to last a while, tell that to the moths. The next bit of kit I've got to show you has been well and truly nibbled on. It was in the attic for many decades, but I love it. It's from the Navy, the senior service. This navy blue wool jacket belonged to a wren called Margaret Tyers. Now, in May 1945, Margaret was, of course, delighted that we had peace in Europe, at least. But her husband was still going to remain in service and go out to the Far East, where they're still fighting. But for Margaret, it meant that she would be demobilised and she could start a family. In fact, her firstborn son was called John, as my father. So clothes hold memories. They also hold connections. You might have things that belong to your family members that are a memento of their time during the war. So that's the Army, the Navy, last up, the RAF. I've only just been donated this, which is why it's at home with me during lockdown. And it belonged to a very young woman who was in the RAF, lovely RAF blue. And as you can see from the arm flash there, she was a radio operator. She loved her time in the services. She loved the parties, she loved the camaraderie. But when she was demobilised, her uniform jacket would hold very sad memories for her as well. It would be a reminder of time when she's on duty, perhaps at night, listening in, waiting for messages that would never come from bomber crews who were shot down over Europe, who crash landed, perhaps bailed out in the North Sea. So clothes hold happy memories of celebration. They hold sad memories of loss. People have been through 6 years of war, after all. And for our young radio operator, demobilisation meant that her smart tie and her shirts were packed away for good. A fresh start, perhaps. Now, one more bit of uniform, and it might not quite be what you expected. The pinny. Because we mustn't forget the army of housewives. For civilians in the war, they don't have the glamour, the sense of belonging from an issued uniform. However, for many women worldwide, the apron is their key bit of kit, and this has a lovely story with it actually. It was given to a young girl called Audrey, and when Audrey was 14, she learned how to make scones. Now you might say scones, but this is my video, I say scones. When Audrey successfully made her first batch of stones, her mum gave her this apron as a reward. Now, it's got a label inside. You can see that says CC41. It's the British government's utility scheme label. The utility scheme was designed so that we could save on factory space, on fabrics and on labour. So there were fairly standardised designs so that nothing would be wasted. And that principle of not wasting goes throughout the war and is still with us on VE Day. I've got something to show you now that you wouldn't really be wearing for a street party, but it belonged to a woman who had been in uniform, a firewoman called Winifred. Now, Winifred served throughout the Blitz in London, and by VE Day she was delighted that there would be no more casualties, no more rubble clearance. And when she was relaxing, sleeping off her hard work, she had a pair of utility pyjamas. The CC41 label has been washed clean. They've been laundered so many times. Now, in the spirit of making your clothes last, Gwyneth wore these and wore these and wore these and washed these until the 1970s. And then they were not wasted. They were given to her daughter. Now, Winifred's daughter noticed that on the pyjama bottoms, they were a little bit worn out. So in fine wartime mending spirit, she got a tea towel and she mended them. Oh, wrong way round. Tea towel, mended. Have you seen what it is here? Love it. Go on, there it is. It's the magic roundabout. Now, this may not be in a fancy museum. It may not be couture, but I love it for the story it tells. So there's Winifred's pyjamas. Talking of fancy clothes, if we look at civilian clothes, most of them are homemade. You can still buy things if you've got the coupons and the money. But for a lot of people, using sewing patterns such as Mordella or Butterick or Simplicity, it means you can turn a precious bit of fabric into a new design, or cut up your husband's golf clothes, as I said. And this dress is a homemade style. It's actually from the US of A, Iowa to be precise. And if you look closely, it will have little details, very, very small hem allowances, very narrow seam allowances, very limited number of buttons. But then there's extra pizzazz, such as these bows and shoulder pads, big enough to land a B-52 bomber on. And these all give that very typical 1940s style. So it's not particularly long, it's got a nice little flirty kick around the knee. And for a little bit more pep, fix your hair up. You might want to do a victory roll. I don't think I've done too badly with mine. I'm not brilliant at hairstyles. I've got it rolled over an old stocking. Now, of my two grandmas, the one who was in the Navy, she liked to put waves in her hair with dinky curlers. Do you remember those? And my other grandmother had very long hair, very long dark hair, and she would roll it up in sausage curls and then jam Kirby grips in. If you leave your hair so it hasn't been washed for a while, then it stays up better. So your hair's up. And as far as makeup goes, the chances are you're not going to be able to get hold of a lot. So moisturiser, if you can get it, a bit of Pond's cream or Nivea, and powder as well, just a bit of powder, maybe a bit of rouge. If you haven't got rouge, slap your cheeks. There we are, get a bit of colour. And lipstick is your number one makeup item. Nice tangy victory red. So I'm feeling quite pizzazz-ish. That's not a word. Pizzazz-ish. And while I'm talking about getting hold of fabric for making your own clothes, you're probably thinking, I know what you need to get hold of in the war if you're particularly canny. You thinking what I'm thinking? Parachute silk. If you do happen to have an enemy airplane crash land on your Dig for Victory allotment, make sure you snaffle the parachute. And if you're very canny, you can cut your underwear, silk undies, out of the triangles of fabric. Now this is an original piece of 1940s parachute silk, but I've got some garments that have been made up. A slip, very good for wearing under fine fabrics and see-through clothes. And this is parachute silk with a bit of lace at the top. And then, I love this so much. It's not really anything to do with a victory party. For your snoozing afterwards, it's a nightie. And the lady who made this, she maybe didn't use the whole parachute, but it comes close. It is very, 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 very roomy. In fact, you could probably fit a couple of airmen under there. You can see on the design that she's actually incorporated the seams of the parachute. So they would have gone down to the cords right at the bottom. And then she's gone into her sewing box and she's added on some antique Honiton lace at the neckline just to spruce it up. And while I'm on underwear and nightwear, if you are going to a victory party and you're going to be dancing the hokey cokey, please ladies, make sure your underwear stays up. And I'm not just talking about Lindy hopping with one of the Yanks. I mean the buttons. Because with rubber being in short supply and elastic being in short supply, the chances are your undies are fastened with a little button at the waistline. This is a pair of original French knickers, as they're called. They're sometimes known as easy feelers, but I'm not sure why. Anyway, keep your button neatly, securely stitched at the top, or you could end up like a lady from Harrogate in Yorkshire. She was out dancing with a young man she'd just met. And maybe she was, I don't know, maybe it was Glenn Miller. Maybe she was in the mood. Whatever, ding, the button popped. The knickers fell to the ground. Her young man was not discombobulated. He scooped them up, put them in a pocket, and she thought, he's a keeper. Literally, she married him. Now, I don't have her wedding dress, but I do have a very special dress here from May 1945. Give me a mo. A wedding dress made not of parachute silk, but of the new wonder fabric, nylon. The government is introducing nylon parachutes by the end of the war, and if you're lucky you can get hold of surplus stock. This wedding dress was worn by a bride, as I said, in 1945. If you look on the back, it's got that lovely bow detail, something to look at when you're saying your vows. Now, two things to be aware of with nylon. One, no smoking, it's flammable. And two, it's transparent. Wear a slip underneath. So fabulous, fabulous civilian clothes, really smart uniforms. And if you're going to something more formal than a street party, how about a full-length gown? This is a lovely velvet and crepe evening gown, teamed up with some marcasite brooches. Very nice indeed. Now, victory means liberation for many people in Europe. Although, I suppose it depends who you are, what victory means. For the Allies, victory is celebration. For Germany and her allies, it means defeat. And liberation was something that many people in occupied Europe were looking forward to. They needed a sense of hope during 6 years of war. And it may seem frivolous, but clothes can actually represent hope. There were people who kept something particular in their wardrobe, a liberation dress or a liberation suit, something that could be put on to represent that monumental moment. One such person who had a liberation suit was Jeanette Spanier. She went on to work in Paris couture after the war. As a Jew, she'd had to go into hiding. And when she heard that the Americans were liberating Paris, she put on her suit. And since she couldn't get a vehicle ride, she had to cycle to Paris. And, well, you can imagine. Chain broke, she fell off her bike, landed in the mud, and she ended up welcoming the Americans to the city, completely torn and bedraggled. But who cares? Liberation. But as I say, liberation depends who you are. Across Europe, SS guards, who'd been used to having their uniforms representing their power and their so-called superiority. Come liberation of concentration camps and extermination centres, they were very quickly taking off their uniforms. They were putting on civilian clothes, trying to blend in with refugees and survivors in the concentration camps. And for German civilians, there was very quickly a sense that reckoning has come, that all the years of National Socialism have come to defeat, and it meant an unpicking of swastikas on armbands and flags. It meant unpinning membership badges, and it meant sewing white flags of surrender. In contrast, for those survivors of Nazi persecution, and I'm thinking particularly of survivors in concentration camps, clothes gave them a very profound sense of humanity and identity again after all of their degradation and suffering. And so in Bergen-Belsen, liberated by the British in April, there were, for VE Day, there were parties, there were celebrations for the survivors. Yes, there would be music, there would be bunting, but the Union flag had gone missing. And it turned out that this flag had been appropriated by a survivor, a Holocaust survivor, a seamstress of variable morals, I mean in terms of organising the flag for herself. She took the flag and sewed it into a skirt to wear for the celebrations. I think that's brilliant. Now, another survivor named Eva Schloss that I spoke to, she was liberated from Auschwitz by the Russian army, and one of the Russian infantry women gave her a tunic to wear. You can see this Soviet tunic on display now at the Museum of Resistance in Amsterdam. But Eva actually said that the thing that really made her feel human again and female again was when she got her hands on a bra. And I know it might seem frivolous, but having your clothes taken away, having your dignity taken away, being refused underwear was profoundly humiliating for people in concentration camps. And so Eva Schloss got her hands on a bra. Now, this isn't Ava's bra. This is a homemade brassiere from 1945, and it was part of a wedding trousseau. So, double celebration, wedding and VE Day. Now, this brings me almost to the end of my talk, and I'm going to finish with a bit of red, white and blue. This is a replica corsage made by a friend and given to me during one of my history wardrobe presentations. Red, white and blue would be hung around the country. And just because I'm recording this, I can't get the safety pin to stay, but we'll just imagine that's fastened securely on. And to go with my red, white and blue, I need a hat. What better way to perk up an outfit? I've got a couple here. This fantastic hat, a lovely red one. How do you like that? This is an American hat. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love the way it tilts on the head. You fasten it with a hairpin, so I'm quite fancying that. What do you reckon? Yep. Or something with a little bit more glitter, more glam from America also. I've lost this already. Now, I love collecting knitting patterns, sewing patterns and such like. And when you flick through them, they look brilliant. And you think, oh yeah, I'd love one of these. Get one of these corsages made. And I've had very talented knitters who've knitted up, I'm going to go for it again, who've knitted up sweaters for me and siren suits. But my best friend Elsie was very proud to have made a victory hat. Elsie's 84, and her idea of what you should be wearing on VE Day, well, of course she remembers VE Day the first time round, and as a young girl, our Elsie had been told to get home on time, but she sneaked out of the house after bedtime and was out on the streets of Wakefield dancing the hokey cokey. Unfortunately, she was rumbled. Her aunt spotted her and sent her back home again. But Elsie just sneaked off into a different part of the crowd and carried on dancing. So here's Elsie's hat. It's a replica. Give me a moment. And this has fallen off again. It's a replica hat in red, white and blue. I'm not entirely sure how to wear it. I think it goes like that, or like that, or like that. Maybe I won't wear a hat. Whatever you're wearing for your VE Day celebrations, maybe you are wearing 1940s gear, maybe, because we're still in lockdown, maybe you're in your pyjamas or your leggings, why not? Maybe you're in face masks or hospital scrubs. But whatever you're doing and however you're commemorating, I hope that you will raise a glass or pour a cuppa in memory of all those who fought on the home fronts and the battle fronts. And I'm going to drink a cup of Yorkshire tea in their memory. It's a bit cold now, but the thought is there. Thank you for joining me for Victory Fashion, and I'll see you on the other side of the pandemic. Ta-ra for now.